but our guest speaker today, we're very excited to have someone joining us from the change agent. Cynthia Peters is the editor, so I'll be handing it to her in a little bit. But I wanted to just say a couple of words about how this webinar came to be. So we have done a bit of an exchange with World Education, which is an organization in Boston that also does professional development for adult education. And they are providing us with this content and this webinar today. And then we've done some work with them around the English language proficiency standards. And so we're just trying to compile all our resources and not duplicate and really benefit from the various expertise that we all have. So we're just very glad to have this partnership going with the New England Literacy Resource Center and World Education. So I'm going to hand it off first to Astrid for a little tech check, and then we'll get going with the content of the webinar. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Astrid Leiden over at the Department of Education. I'm going to be your tech support today. So we do have everyone muted on the webinar to cut down on background noise. So we'll primarily be using the chat function to communicate today. If you are having any technical difficulties, you can go ahead and select my name from the drop-down menu in the chat function and chat to me directly, and I'll try to help you out with any of your technical issues. And if you've got comments for the presenter or other participants, we're going to be asking you to share and participate throughout, then you're going to select the all audience and chat directly into the chat box. So thank you all for joining us today.
So yeah, Cynthia, go ahead.
Yeah, I will. I would like to forward the slide, and it's not forwarding. So I'm just wondering if you can give me a heads up on that.
You should be able to click down bottom left-hand side of your PowerPoint. There should be some arrows, or you should be able to use the arrows on your keyboard.
Okay. I don't see the arrows.
Can you just click on the PowerPoint?
Okay, yeah, and then the scroll thing works. Okay, well then we meant to be on this screen while you were giving the tech check, Astrid. So thank you for that, and thanks everybody for being here today. My name is Cynthia Peters, and I am the editor of the Change Agent magazine. Some of you may have heard about it, some of you may not, but I'll give you a little bit more introduction about that. But before I do that, or maybe possibly while I'm doing that, I was wondering if people might want to jump in and start using the chat box kind of early on, just to get used to it and also to introduce yourselves. I'd love to know, for example, what you teach, what level you teach at, and just so I know who's in the room here with us today, and how that might help me meet your needs. So it also gives you a chance to locate the chat box and make sure that you pick that you're going to chat with everybody in the entire audience, and just tell me your name and what you teach. And while you're doing that, I will introduce you to the change agent, and then I'll come back and look at the chat box and see who's there. Thank you. Thank you. I see Nancy's already jumped in there. Before we get started introducing the change agent, I just wanted to point out some of the objectives that we have for the webinar. Of course, by the time this webinar is over, we want to make sure you know how to access the Change Agent magazine and all of our online materials. We want to make sure that you can articulate 2 to 3 benefits of using the change agent besides the college and career readiness standards, which we're going to be focusing on here in the webinar, and sort of making sure you know how the change agent can help you align your teaching to those standards. But not only that, also provides many other benefits as well. So then the 4th bullet is just to apply strategies from the change agent that help you teach to these standards, such as using the change agent grid that we offer on our website, doing the activities related to the articles in the magazine, and having students listen to the audio and bringing in the call for articles. So that's a little bit more specific objectives of the webinar. We're going to revisit those objectives at the very end of the webinar, and actually we have a poll for you where you'll be able to say, if you feel like if those objectives were met as far as you're concerned. So I see more people introducing themselves. Welcome, Jill and Jeannie and Marn and Miriam. Thank you all for saying hi and for telling us about what you teach. So I'll be scrolling through here and checking and seeing what people are saying as we go through the webinar. So what is the change agent? Well, being an editor, I composed a sentence here which is desperately in need of an editor, but I was trying to capture the main points of what the change agent has to offer. So we are an engaging and empowering magazine full of student-generated relevant content in print and audio at various levels of complexity, designed to teach basic skills aligned with the CCRS and to transform and inspire adult learners. So that's how I would sort of sum it up in one sentence, not so elegant, but a decent summary. And I just included some pictures of some of the student writers who are in our current issue, the Career Pathways issue. And that's the one I'm going to be drawing off of mostly in this webinar to talk about how you can use the change agent to align with college and career readiness standards. The change agent, as I just mentioned, is available in print and online. I like to say that, we're not just a magazine, we're actually a whole website full of resources and all kinds of materials. But as a teacher or a program, you can choose to just get the print, you can get an individual copy of the magazine, or you can get a bulk set, which is great for the classroom. You can just hand a copy to everybody in your class, and I love that as a literacy building thing in and of itself, just to give a magazine to your students and let them have the literacy experience of flipping through a magazine that's written by their peers, that's full of relevant content, that's really going to resonate for them in their everyday life, and they can treat it the way you or I treat a magazine, like when we're standing at a grocery checkout line or something. We just flip through, when our eye lands on something we're interested in, then we read it, and a student can have that experience with this magazine too. So the bulk subscription is a great idea. There's also the online subscription, which gets you access to all the audio. And the cool thing about the online subscription is that it's just $20 per teacher per year. And once a teacher has a subscription, he or she can share their username and password with all their students. So it's a great resource. I have my students load it onto their phone and put in the username and password, and then they can access the audio whenever they feel like it. So it's a great teaching tool. So that's some background information about the change agent. And I will also be pausing just to occasionally see if people have questions. So if you want to put a question in the chat box, please feel free to do that. And I think the organizers will probably be helping me keep an eye on the chat box. So if it seems like I'm not noticing your question, the organizers might notice it for me and bring it to my attention. So please feel free to use the chat box. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking in depth into the career pathways issue. This is our current issue, and you actually, in your materials section, let me open that back up again, you might notice that you have this materials section of the webinar platform, and you can download a PDF of the articles that we're going to be talking about in the webinar. So sometimes on a PowerPoint slide, you can't really see the article that well, so I wanted you to have access to them in PDF format as well. And also you can just print it out and bring it into your classroom now. It's sort of a few free articles from the change agent which you might want to try teaching off of. And it includes this front cover because it has our table of contents on it, and I also threw in the inside front cover so you could see a picture of our editorial board. One of the ways we work is we create an editorial board for each issue of the magazine, and the editorial board includes students and teachers and allies from the field, and so their creativity and their energy and their ideas about what's important and what's not important, that all goes into informing what each issue of the change agent looks like. And maybe if somebody in Minnesota would like to be on the editorial board sometime, I would love to welcome you on. People participate by phone when they're far away, and I have teachers bring students into the process, so it's a great leadership development opportunity for a student to play a role like this. So yeah, consider being on the editorial board. you even get paid a $50 stipend for each meeting that you attend. So keep that in mind for you or your students. So let me just jump in here to the first article that I wanted to draw your attention to. It's this one called My Winding Career Path. It's by Kelsey Littlefield. She's from New Hampshire. And she writes about how, she started down her career path, but then she got derailed because college was too hard. She wasn't really quite ready for it. She had to leave, go back to adult basic ed, improve her basic skills, then try college again, and she talks about how challenging that was disappointing, but, it was also just real life. And she got back into school and she started taking classes in her field and she got a job in her field. And, I think it will resonate with students a lot. In fact, I know it does. I've already tried it in my classroom, and everybody kind of really latches onto this one because, they feel like it really is hard to take a straight path to where you want to go. And especially if you're an adult learner, there's so much going on in your adult life between raising your family and probably working at least one job, if not two. There's many things that get in the way of you just walking down your path. So I created this little activity to go with the article. Reaching your goals, what they say it will look like, what it really looks like, and then an opportunity for a student to say what it looks like to you. And then it might be hard for you to read the italics underneath the images, but the activity, what that says is almost everyone has a winding career path. Interview people in your class or in your community and find out how they got into their current job or career. Share a time in your life when you had to go backwards or sideways in order to keep going down your chosen path. So, I create activities for almost every article in the Change Agent to support teachers to have something to bring into the classroom that will do things like enhance persistence by building community in the classroom, by giving students really relevant content that written by a peer that will be engaging and feel like real life to them. And this activity is an example of that because it asks students to interview people in their class or their community. So that's going to get students using their English language skills with each other, possibly even outside of the class. It could be other classes in the program. It could be other teachers or administrators in the program. That would be interesting to talk to people who work in the program and ask them, how did you end up becoming a teacher? Or how did you end up working at the front desk here? Or how did you end up running this place? And get the backstory. And then bring those stories back together into the classroom. And I've actually been doing this in my classroom. It's been so fascinating. It turns out, my students have these amazing, rich backgrounds where, we've surfaced even credentials that they have that I didn't even know about. And it's led us into this whole work of students feeling more grounded or feeling more like it's a possibility to do something that this is a hotel that my class takes place in, and they offer job shadowing to the workers at the hotel, which means they're allowed to get paid to just shadow somebody else's job so they can sort of have a window into another kind of work and think about possibly getting into a different kind of work at the hotel. And so it's really affected my students so much. They feel like, wow, maybe I could actually do that because they've kind of taken stock of their background and seen and put on paper and seen, we've raised it up and lifted it up in the classroom and kind of honored it and noticed it. And it's really inspired confidence for people to think about, trying some new things. So this kind of activity, there's ways that it's aligned with the college and career readiness standards and the speaking and listening skills. And then as a teacher, I'm sure you could think of probably 100 ways to bring that back into the classroom and kind of distill the information or put it on posters or chart it or get people to write it up, share it verbally, So it's doing all those things as well as, creating community, creating connection, inspiring confidence, lifting up people's skills and abilities. So, you can mine, I try to create activities and publish articles that are going to be easy for teachers to mine for more extensions and more activities. And I want to actually go back to the previous screen. You may have noticed that this little orange square here mentions that this article is level 6. And what that's about is we level all of the articles in the change agent. So this is another thing just to point us back to another college and career readiness standard. I don't know if anybody, I know you all are familiar with the college and career readiness, strands, probably the A, B, C, D, and E, the fact that they're divided into those bands. And just to help you figure out where the articles fall in those 5 sections, the change agent gives you a grade level equivalent for all of the articles. We don't publish it in our magazine because we don't want to be incredibly focused on level when we're trying to create a kind of a magazine literacy experience. We don't want people to be focused on, oh, I shouldn't be interested in that because it's too low level for me, or oh, I shouldn't try to read that because it's too hard for me. We just want people to be mostly motivated by interest, but we also do want to be transparent about levels, and so we make them available on our website. And the audio articles, it's immediately available when you do an audio article. And so students can actually, if they do listen to audio and notice, well, I feel mostly comfortable at a level 4, there's sort of a transparency about that. They can see, okay, well, that's where I'm at right now, and they can notice themselves, start to feel comfortable at level 5, and then moving on to level 6. And so that also inspires some kind of sense of mastery, which is another persistence factor, actually. When you can notice yourself improving and getting increased competence, you're more likely to stay and keep going to school and keep doing what you're doing because you're noticing yourself improving. So we like to make the levels available, but we don't make a big deal about it in the magazine. And I included this slide here for people who are still trying to make sense of, okay, where are my students located? And maybe you use the Best Plus, maybe you use TABE, maybe you use some other way of trying to level your students, and keeping in mind that the change agent uses grade level equivalent. And so when you see a level on our website or on this PowerPoint, for example, that's what it means. So back up there, level 6, that means that that's a grade level equivalent. So that would fall under D in this case. Okay. So I wonder if people might want to chat for a minute about this article that I shared with you and this idea of using this activity. Does that resonate for people? Would that be meaningful to your students? Can you imagine other extensions or things that you would do with this activity? How would you compile the information? What kind of supports do you think it would offer your students? So I'm going to give people a chance to just find the chat box and find your keyboard, and just as a creative teacher, which I know you are, what would you do with something like this? Would you have students maybe design their own kind of meandering arrows and then label them for where they've been and what they've done in their lives? Perhaps extend it into the future. Where do you want to go? How do you think you might get there? How often do you think you'll go backwards and sideways? So I'd love to hear if people have any ideas about how you might use something like this. And maybe, I think it's pretty clear how it touches on the college and career readiness standards, but what other benefits would it have for your students? I've mentioned a few of them, but maybe you'll come up with more. And so I don't see a mad rush into the chat box. I won't take too long waiting for people to write. I see Nicole wrote a future timeline of life and goals. Yeah, it's not always linear. I mean, what I noticed in my classroom was students just felt so relieved to read a story that was a non-linear pathway, and just to get that kind of affirmed for them. And the reason why I started with this article when we did a whole section on career pathways is because I wanted to start with the sense of there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with not being on a straight path. And the way you're doing things is just right, and it can work just fine, and I wanted to start with a positive feeling. Marn says that she might share her own winding career path. it's striking me that winding is a good English word too, right? Because you want to read it almost like wind. Wind is a much more familiar English word, but winding is not so familiar. So there's a little English language moment. Yeah, but that's a great idea for a teacher to share her winding career path, you know, so as to make the students feel comfortable doing their own. Patsy
I'm gonna,
says,
yeah, I'm just gonna interrupt Cynthia. We had another chat. I'm not sure you saw. Miriam says that particular activity would be excellent to use for discussion. Her path would be one step forward, two steps back, and so you could convey that visually and be one way to let students know that we're all human. And that
oh, thank you for
happens for
that.
teachers and students. So
Yes,
I appreciate that.
yes,
And I like the idea of winding being having multiple meanings too, like to wind a clock or a winding path. And that might
mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely a great idea to model, you know, the sort of being okay with the fact that things are that the pathway can be nonlinear. And I think it actually is a good filter for teachers all the time. If you're going to ask your students to do something, you know, ask yourself if you're willing to do it too. And in fact, you know, do it yourself, because that is part of creating community in the classroom. You know, when you share yourself. And when people share themselves and show themselves, it makes people feel good usually, and it makes people feel, when they feel known by their fellow students and by their teacher, you know, there's a sense of, on that persistence score, you're more likely to come back, you know, because people know you, they care about you, they notice if you're not there, and, you know, those sort of community building activities can be really important. So. Oh, Helen is mentioning a timeline of learning English. Yes, yes, and that is going to go in fits and starts as well, you know, and that's real life. That's how it is. So good. Well, thank you all. And if you think of more things that you might want to add, please feel free to just go ahead and put them in there. But meanwhile, what we'll do is we'll just keep moving forward. So here's another article that I wanted to show you, and this is on a 2-page spread of the magazine. It's actually our lead article, so it's pages 4 and 5 of the magazine, and it's a lot to look at. Let me close this so you can see the whole thing. There's a lot of elements here, and I go back and forth. Sometimes I think, oh my gosh, the change agent is too dense, there's just too much going on in it, there's too much gray, it's just too hard to look at. And sometimes I try to make the pages simpler with more white space, but I've also heard that it's not bad to give students a complex page to look at, you know, and then offer some coaching and some reassurance about taking your time with a page that has a lot of elements. And this is an important academic and college and workplace skill, to be able to confront a lot of text with lots of elements in it, and not, you know, and still feel like, okay, this text is my friend. You know, I'm going to take this apart. I can look at it one piece at a time, make sense of it. And so the way I start with this piece is actually what I start with is the image that you can see on the first page. And it's a kind of a beautiful image. It's an image of a midwife supporting a birth, and it's fun to look at. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's in your PDF. And you know, students can talk a little bit about that, like who's the midwife, who's giving birth, what's happening, what do you think about it? You know, it might bring up all kinds of things. Underneath it, there's a caption that explains that the word midwife comes from the Old English, meaning where mid means with and wife means woman. So the meaning of the word midwife is actually just with woman. And so that's a starting place, and then it also opens your mind up to what is this article going to be about? Oh, it's about somebody's journey to a successful career. Does that mean that they wanted to become a midwife? And you know, interesting point, when you read the article, you find out that yes, this woman's dream was to become a midwife. And by the time you get to the end of the article, you find out she has not made it to her dream yet, but she has become an RN. And this is a huge accomplishment for this student. I mean, she takes you through her journey here, you know, having been born in a village in the Ivory Coast, and then having moved to the United States, living in Rhode Island, and working on her high school diploma, going into a transition to college program, finally going to college. So you kind of go through her whole story, and then you get this humbling, reminder that, even as amazing as she's done, she's still working on her dream. And so I like this article for the balance that it has. Also, she's very clear that she didn't, this is not a, I picked myself up by my bootstraps kind of a story, although obviously she had a lot of grit and, incredibly powerful person. She also really honors the village that it took to get her where she is. And so I like the idea of lifting that up in any kind of career pathway story, that that it's both personal grit and the village that you can pull around yourself or that you have access to support you to get where you're going. So I wanted you to see the 2-page spread just so you could get a sense of the elements that are on a page, but I also broke it down for you so you could see it better and we could talk about it more. One of the activities in the bottom left-hand corner of the first page is just for the student to identify the career steps that Sidoni, the author, took. And the question is just, what steps has Sidoni taken so far to realize her dream? List them here. Now, this isn't an incredibly rich question, it's pretty much of a rote question. It requires the student to go back, to look for evidence in the text, which is, of course, a CCR skill that really constantly being reinforced and emphasized. So they do have to go back, they have to find the answer in the text, but that's kind of all they have to do. It's just find the answer in the text and then list it, so it's not delving into complexity too much, but it is helping make sure students comprehend and understand the steps and really can articulate the steps. So it's an important piece of the puzzle to be able to do that. There's also this chart, which was on the upper right-hand corner of the second page, and it's a little fuzzy because it lost some resolution in the process here, but this is a great critical thinking moment for students and sort of mathematical thinking, because it gives information about healthcare occupations with the most projected job openings in the United States. And there's some interesting things that you might notice. Like, for example, registered nurse is the fastest growing in terms of hard numbers, but its job growth in terms of percent is only 26%. Whereas just below it, home health aides is also very up there in terms of job growth, in terms of hard numbers, but its job growth in terms of percent is 69%. So how could that be true that the hard numbers could be so close, but the percent or the rate increase could be so different? And so really wonderful opportunity to think about percents and about rate and about when something is growing from an already very large base. It doesn't take a large percentage point increase to grow by a lot, but if it's growing by a smaller base, then you need a larger percent growth to equal a large growth in hard numbers. So this is a fun thing to look at. It also just provides information for people who might be thinking about careers in healthcare. So lots of good stuff there. Then there's also just some more activities here. I love one of her quotes is just a very rich metaphor. She says, "Believe me, navigating the sea known as the U.S. higher education system would have been much rougher if I had not received support." So she turns navigating post-secondary school into a sea that has to be navigated, and that sea can be very rough, and that you need supports to navigate that sea. So there's like just great language in there, and brings up figurative language, and you could ask students, what metaphor would you use to describe your educational journey? What's it felt like to you? And you could really dig deep into that. And so I like to point people to language. That's, of course, part of the college and career readiness skills, is being able to use figurative language and understand figurative language.
And yeah, there are a couple of great chats I might just draw people's attention to here. So Christine a bit ago mentioned how it is actually quite important that we give our students some dense, difficult text now and again, because that is the kind of text they are likely to encounter in their daily lives. So it's good preparation. And then Miriam mentioned that one of her students just today, she writes, realized that he might actually like reading stories. So we're working on inference and the text is more dense than he's used to. So that was a good moment there. And Christine, who is our English Language Arts and Literacy Coordinator here at Atlas, mentioned that questions about major details like the career steps questions are necessary for a set of text-dependent questions. Make sure that students understand the gist of a text before we move on to those higher level thinking questions. So the Change Agent article is offering just so many different levels of comprehension and interaction with that text. It's great to see.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm going for. You know, when I'm choosing articles and when I'm creating activities to go with them, I'm trying to think about all those things. So yeah, I'm glad you're noticing that. And I'm also, of course, always thinking about how to support the student to feel like an agent, how to not kind of be blaming of the student, or helping the student notice where they have supports or might be able to build support. So that's one of the reasons why I developed this question, the second one down, which says, what does she mean when she says it required a village to help her become a nurse, and who was in her village? And then the next question down, who is in your village? Write about what supports you have and some specific ways they support you. What supports could you add to your network? And I love this opportunity for students to notice who they have on their side. You know, sometimes we can get so beaten down, not just our students, but all of us, by all the things that we're carrying. And it's hard to remember and notice, oh, there's people who are really in my corner with me. And there's a great activity called a force field analysis. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this, but you can Google it, force field analysis. You can do this with your students, and it's like a spectrum activity. Like you notice who's a support for you and how do you increase their relevance in your life and their presence in your life. And then you ask who's less supportive, or what kinds of forces in your life are not supportive of your goals, and how can you decrease those. And it might not be how do you get rid of those, because that's maybe not realistic. Like you might have a husband who really wants you to be home cooking dinner and not going to school. And so it's not necessarily realistic to say, well, get rid of your husband. I mean, that's not necessary, but how can you limit the power of his pull in that direction? So it's a little bit more of a realistic way of going about addressing, what's supporting you and what's kind of getting in your way, and how can you build up one and limit the other. So this could open up a huge conversation and all kinds of activities in the classroom, and people again kind of doing that other thing of getting to know each other. I also notice what happens in the classroom when people start talking about these kinds of things, they help each other. They say, oh, you need a ride to school? Well, where do you live? Or, oh, well, wait, well, what childcare is your kid in? My kid's in a childcare where they never cancel. Or, and people share information and share ideas about troubleshooting. And so, yeah. And then the last thing on this page is, it says, look at the career pathway on page 7. What steps should you take if you want to become a nurse? And so then people have been immersed in this story about a student who became a nurse, and then they've been immersed in these other questions about how she got support and what worked for her, and then they can look at an actual career pathway. And this is something that I developed. I copied a model that came out of somewhere else, and I got most of my information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And you can see basically what this is doing. It kind of starts with the lower paid healthcare jobs and works its way up to the higher paid ones and the ones that require more and more training. And it offers the median hourly pay according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the education and the time required to get the degree or the credential. And it says a little bit about what the skills and tasks are related to that career. And so, whereas previously a student's eyes might have glazed over when they looked at this, kind of like, wait, I don't know if I can make sense of this, I don't know which way do I read, left to right, top to bottom, what do I do? now maybe because of being immersed in this story and this question, maybe and you can coach them on this, let your eyes settle down on this chart. And what I say to my students is, let your eye just roam around a little bit, see where it lands, and just start to tell me what you notice. Do you notice columns? Maybe they'll notice the hourly wage on the left and the number of years on the right. People will start to say things. Maybe they'll say, well, I see a triangle in the background. Why is there a triangle there? And then people can talk about that. And if anybody can figure out why there's a triangle there, you can let me know. No, I'm just kidding. But people will have different ideas about what that triangle means, and that's a fun thing to do. Just take it apart and see where students' minds go, and really honor that, looking at charts is a different kind of reading. It's a different literacy skill. It's kind of more fun in some ways. It's, your eye isn't just going left to right, and then down the page. It can go all around, and so there's a more creative way of reading and taking in information. And I love spending time with my students on charts and just letting them tell me what they see. And that also teaches me something about, just what pops for people.
A couple of things in the chat box. People love this chart, Cynthia, and they're wondering if this is available for other career paths. Do you know?
Yes. Well, in the Change Agent, we have a couple. So. Okay. Yeah, you'll see them. This one is included in your packet. There's one, I think, for construction. There's one, I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a few, and we're about to see another one, which is a totally different look.
Oh, great! Thank you.
Yeah, and so this is a health lattice career pathway. That's a mouthful. Is it a lattice or is it a pathway? What is it? There's all kinds of ways to graphically render this idea of moving forward in your career, and this one I thought was interesting because it has various starting places. So from any of those starting places at the bottom, you could get that credential of becoming a medical assistant. And after becoming a medical assistant, there's 3 different ways you could sort of choose what kind of health care work you want to do: lab or technical, patient care, or admin. And that's a very different look from this other one, which kind of is a little bit more linear, right? There's like this progression. You're just going up this little pyramid. This one, a little bit more open-ended, a little bit more, you could start with this medical assistant credential and then figure out which way you want to go, and then which ones have more room to grow. So the patient care one, and maybe the admin one too, has a little bit more room to grow, whereas lab technical kind of tops out. And then I didn't go find the median hourly wage in this one. I thought I would leave it to students. This could be part of the activity, is go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and go figure it out, look it up. And you could have a lot of fun with this. Teachers, first of all, what does median mean? No pun intended about median and mean there. How do you find it on the website? If that's the national median, what's true in my geographical area? Is it going to be different in my geographical area? And you could find that out. You could even, fill this out for the national. You could do a national version. You could have half the class fill it out based on Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you could have the other half fill it out based on, what's true in Minnesota, assuming you can get that data. So people could really see, and they wouldn't have to, it's a little bit of busy work to have to do this for every single one, but you could, they could pick the one that they're most interested in and just do that and see what they see and share their information, and really then they'd be getting acquainted with a website, doing research, finding out information about, from there they might go, well, I'm not really interested in healthcare, but while I was over there at the BLS website, I found out all this other stuff. Look what I found, and people could, really start engaging in exploring career pathways. Okay, so yeah, one of the activities I think in the magazine was, well, just comparing these 2 kinds of pathways, the 2 charts. Which one most resonates for you, or which one grabs you the most, or which do you think is the most useful? Again, just getting students to think critically about a chart, and what works and what doesn't work, and what it makes them think about their own their own life and their own career pathways. So let's see. I want to just go to the next slide now, which is a time for us to return to the chat box. And I'm so gratified to see people are just using the chat box in an ongoing way. Thank you so much. Big shout out to everybody for doing that. It makes it much richer, I think, when people are kind of contributing and chatting and talking. So thank you. This is an official time for chatting. And the question that I have for you is, so I've been mentioning some of the CCR skills, and hopefully I know that you all are familiar with a lot of them already. But what I want to ask you here is, what else do you feel like your students are getting besides those academic skills? What are some other things happening in your classroom or happening for your students as individuals that are going to be helpful? I see Nicole just put relationships. Yeah, definitely been emphasizing that. Somebody asked, does the change agent have information about overcoming common obstacles that come up on a career path? Huh, that's a good question. I mean, we in a lot of our issues, we do address that very question, and I can try to point you to some of those. If you want to email me, it's probably too hard for me to get into during the webinar, but please email me and I'll get back to you and we can talk more about that. But the change agent, this is a good time for me to say this maybe. You know, think about our name, you know, the change agent. What we're trying to remind people of is that they are agents of change, that we are all agents of change in our own life, in the life of our family, in the life of our community. And so many ways that messaging happens in our culture and our society is that you're really not an agent of change. You know, you're a recipient of, you know, as a student, you're a vessel for learning, or as a worker, you're, you know, somebody who you're just doing your job and you're doing what you're told to do. And as a community member, your most important role is to, you know, go shopping. You know, you could be forgiven for thinking that when you look at how the media frames, you know, the most important human activities that we do, and shopping, you know, comes up there as the one of the top ones. So we're trying to reverse some of that in the change agent, and we're trying to lift up everybody as being an agent of change, especially our students who are incredible, showing incredible agency just by making it to class, you know, and by trying to take on this really hard thing of learning English and trying to set goals and trying to reach them while they're raising a family, while they're working jobs and everything else they're doing and managing. So whenever we tackle any topic, we try to always have voices of students who are showing themselves as agents of change. And it can be in very micro ways, as well as in medium-sized ways, as well as in really, really large ways. So every issue of the magazine is pushing that idea, and I think it's really empowering and really important for students to see themselves reflected that way. So I don't know if that partly answers your question, but so back to the chat box. Miriam says, my students are really opening up and seem to be gaining a lot just from having someone to talk to. This makes learning much more connected and meaningful. Yes, I love the word connected. Whenever we were connected, we feel safer, we feel ready to take risks. It's very risky to have to try to speak English, to try to learn English, to try to be willing to fail, be willing to make mistakes. So good. I mean, anything that's where you're connecting people, where people are laughing, where people are sharing, then you're really doing a really important underlying work. Nicole mentions understanding of how to network. Yes, yes, because actually you're building networking in your class. And then, you know, if people are interviewing people in their community or people in the program, that's networking, and that is so important. Being able to use local resources, draw off local resources, connect people to you and your family, your community, so that you can get what you need. These are really great ideas, and I would be so gratified to think the change agent is actually really doing that. Somebody here wrote, Dawn wrote, thanks, I know my students would be concerned about obstacles. Is there information about common financial problems that occur on a career path? Yeah, good question. not in this issue, but other resources in world education have a lot on that. And I would love to share those with you. There's some great career exploration activities that talk about, that address that very question, Dawn, and I can point you to those. Okay, so let's, organizers, keep me posted on the chat box, but I will keep us moving through the next couple slides. What we're going to do next is I'm going to actually take you to the Change Agent website and give you a little tour of the website. And before I do that, and while I'm doing that, I really want you to see what questions come up for you, because at the end of the tour I'll ask you what questions you have about the website. So keep those in mind as we go. And the other thing I want to give you a heads up on is the 4 main elements that I'm going to look for and show you on the website. One is that we have these CCRS grids. So for every issue of the Change Agent, for about the last 10 issues or so, I've been breaking down all of the materials and linking them or associating them with some of the anchor standards. And to make the chart more approachable, I grouped the anchor standards together. So if you'll see that for the reading anchor standards, the first 3 are sort of grouped together under key ideas and details. And I kind of translated that into everyday English in the middle column. And then I offer you the pages in that issue of the Change Agent that are aligned with those CCRS. So the next grouping is craft and structure, the next grouping is integration of knowledge and ideas, and the final one is range and level of text complexity. And these are available on the website. It's available as a printable PDF, and one of the materials on the webinar platform today is the grid that goes with the career pathways issue. So you have a copy of that in your materials, so you can print that out and use that. So one thing I want to show you on the website is how to get those grids. Another thing I want to show you is the lesson packets. Some of you may not have an online subscription to the Change Agent, so you won't be able to access the audio and you won't be able to access PDFs of all the back issues, but everybody can access the lesson packets. So what I did was I went back through all these issues of the Change Agent and I kind of grouped articles up in new and creative ways and created these CCR-aligned lesson packets. So these are freely available for you to download, and I want to show you, make sure you know how to get those. The other thing I want to show you is our audio. We have lots of great audio available. Not every article is made available in audio, but a good chunk is available each time. And then finally, I want to point you to how to get the call for articles. For this issue, the one we're working on for next spring, which is going to be on hair, if you can believe it. We've gone from career pathways to hair. Yes, the Change Agent is nothing if not a wide-ranging vehicle for articles and thinking. I did 2 calls, one at a much higher level and one at a lower literacy level. And this is the first time I ever thought to do this, and I've been asking myself, why haven't I been doing this in the past? You know, because look at that call on your left. I mean, that's just very dense and hard for a beginning literacy learner to make sense of. So I thought, let me try to do a version that would be more accessible. So I did, and I'm really glad I did. I've gotten a lot more lower literacy submissions, which I'm really grateful for, because I find that people can go really deep and show some really interesting stuff and share some interesting stories, even at beginning literacy levels or beginning English levels. So I'm going to do that from now on. So those are the 4 main things I want to show you. Well, maybe I'll throw in a few other things while I'm at it, but those are the 4 main things. And so let me just go out of this for now and go to my screen, and you'll get to the top page of the Change Agent, and you'll see I mentioned that we have an editorial board for each issue. This was the editorial board for the immigration issue, and it's really fun to be able to pull people's thinking together from all kinds of different different locations. The other thing that's on our top page here is this little video tour of the website. So if I go through this and I go too fast, or you feel like, wait, what did she say? Or you want to show a friend, but you can't quite remember how it all works, you can just take this tour. It's a great little 3-minute tour, and it gives you all the main things that you need to know about the Change Agent website. So come back to the tour later on if you feel like it. So one of the most important tabs is this In the Classroom tab. When you click on it, you see a bunch of different resources here. This is one of the first things I mentioned, which is this College and Career Readiness Standards. You can see that, first of all, what we offer is the main shifts in the standards, just to kind of remind teachers. My assumption is teachers, before these standards were ever created, they were already teaching to a lot of these standards, but knowing the shifts helps teachers kind of remind themselves to keep revisiting complexity, keep revisiting, you know, that idea of finding evidence, and to also keep building knowledge. At least that's as far as the English language arts ones goes. So if you scroll down, you'll see that these are the issues for which I have a grid created, and we can just open up the Career Pathways one. You can see that you can download a printable PDF and open it up and scroll down, and you'll see it's a nice little one-pager that includes the reading, the writing, speaking and listening, and the language standards. And the Change Agent isn't so strong on math, but it always has some math in it, and so I want to point people to that too. So that's what that looks like, and this is where you can find it. You might also find here in the Classroom tab, let's go back onto it, a lot of really good things that are worth exploring. For example, this global index is one of my favorite things. We have about 12, 13, 14 issues loaded into this huge mammoth table of contents, and you can click on the word level and it will sort by level. So now if you're really teaching beginners or people who are really clustered around a certain level, you can go straight to the articles that are at that level. And so say you want to read this one called Labeled Bad. If it's got the headphones next to it, then it's going to be available in audio. I'll just click on it so you can see what it looks like. When you get to an audio page, you can listen to a full article by clicking on that arrow key, that play key. You can click here and save it as an MP3 in case, you know, your students don't have access to the internet and you want to give them a hard copy of the audio. You can also listen to it in sections, so it's sort of chunked. And student can play the same chunk over and over again. They can try repeating it back, they can listen to the English, and then they can say it themselves. They're reading it while they're hearing it, which is a great way not just to learn pronunciation, but also to learn things like punctuation. Because, you know, a comma has a sound to it. You know, when I was in the 3rd grade, the teacher put me in the corner every day. So you hear the sound of the pause of the comma, and it's a little different from the pause of a period. And that's one way we learn punctuation. You know, also same is true with question marks and quote marks and how quote marks set off text. They're going to hear that little subtle inflection, and it's going to help them learn that punctuation. So I really recommend the audio for all sorts of reasons. I'm sure, you know, you can think of even more reasons than the ones I've just mentioned. Here's where you'll find the lesson packets. Let me click on that. We did this actually in honor of our 20th anniversary. We said, wow, we created so much great content over all these years. Why don't we dig back into it and kind of pull it back out again and kind of point people to it in a different kind of a way, rather than just saying, go back and look at that old magazine. So that was what prompted us to do this, and you can see we have 12 lesson packets. One of the ones I want to point you to is this one, this workplace safety one, because later on we're going to talk about a little bit more about workplace safety, and so using this packet could be a great resource. And again, they're freely available. You don't need any kind of online subscription to get it. But yeah, scroll around through here. Here's a beautiful one on Juneteenth, which is some people may not have even heard of Juneteenth. It's a holiday that came out of Texas mostly. It's when slaves in Texas did not hear about that they were emancipated until 1865. And so it became this special holiday of emancipation. And I have this available at 3 levels, grade level 4, 7, and 10. And so you could open up all those packets, and they're all very nicely aligned with the college and career readiness standards. And so if you have people in your class working at different levels, you can have them working on the same content, talking about it together, learning about it together, adding knowledge because they're learning about U.S. history, and at the same time doing academic skills that are appropriate for their level. So scroll around through there and see what grabs your attention. The other thing I want to show you is just the back issues. So when you have an online subscription, you can access PDFs of any of these back issues. And as you can see, we just have a wide range of topics, really relevant topics that are in the news, topics that are fun, celebratory. Although I always joke that, at the change agent, we can take even the hardest topic and find joy, and we can take even the most celebratory topics and, notice things that are amiss. And so in our celebrations issue, it's not just light and fluffy. There's a lot of hard stuff that students grapple with in the celebrations issue. It's really deep. So look around in there and see what students are saying about holidays. And, there's a lot of brokenheartedness that sometimes accompanies holidays. And then there's even a lot of uplift in the prisons issue, believe it or not. As harsh a topic as this is, it's very real for our students. So many of our students have been in prison themselves, have family members or community members that they're close to who have a history of being in prison. So this is very real for students. And the writing is so powerful because people are finding hope, people are struggling, people are finding ways, out of the madness of mass incarceration. Food, immigration, yeah, you can see many, many different topics. So I encourage you to explore around in there. So have I touched on the 4 things that I said I was going to touch on? Let's go back to the PowerPoint and let's make sure I did. Oh, I didn't show you the call for articles. We did the audio, the lesson packets, and the CCRS grids. Let me quickly just show you where to find the call for articles. It's in the Classroom tab again, and you scroll all the way down to invite students to write for the change agent, and you get to this page. The current call for articles, the deadline has passed. So this is no longer relevant for you all, but it's a fun thing to bring into the classroom. The writing prompts are pretty engaging, and the topic is pretty interesting and fun and different. But if you can catch us when we have a current call for articles, you have this extra added bonus of students actually writing for an authentic audience, another college and career readiness skill where they have to think about their audience, know who they're writing for, and pitch their writing to a specific audience. So great way to learn. I mean, and you could approach that in all kinds of ways, including look at a previous issue of the magazine. What is this magazine about? Oh, who reads it? Who writes for it? What's the basic idea? What are they going for in this magazine? And sort of getting a sense of it, and then that would inform how they write their response to the writing prompts in our call for articles. So much learning going on there. And so yeah, I encourage you to check it out. The next one is going to come out in February, and the deadline for that will be early May.
Cynthia, we have a question from Nicole who asks whether this change agent will do or has ever done an issue on becoming a politician.
Wow. No, we never
Good
have.
idea, though, right?
Yes, that's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. We have an issue called our democracy issue, and it's got a whole big section on adult learners doing advocacy, and actually one of the adult learners in that issue ran for city council here in Boston just this last just this last round, this last city council election that
Oh,
we
wow.
had. But yeah,
That's exciting.
that's a really interesting idea. Check out the democracy issue and see what you think about that. It's mostly the way we've tackled that is learners getting involved in advocacy and what that's like going to your state house, talking to the mayor, advocating for adult ed or any other issue in your community that affects you. Thank you for that question. So about the call for articles, I already mentioned that we passed the deadline and the next one is in February. Well, the next call comes out in February and the deadline is early May. So if you want to put that into your pot of ideas that you might be thinking about for next semester, or if you're a program director or something you want to share that with teachers, you could kind of start thinking about it now and planning for that for next semester. I don't even know yet what the topic is going to be for that issue, but we'll decide soon. If you have any great ideas for topics, please let me know. Sometimes I think I can't think of what's the right topic. I'd love to hear your ideas. People thought it was a little nutty to focus on hair, but actually hair is this really rich topic. I mean, it just brings out all these reflections on, what is beauty? Who defines beauty? How does hair, what do religions say about hair? A lot, what does our culture and ideology say about hair? What are our memories about hair? I mean, the things that students are writing about, their memories of how their mother did their hair, or watching how their mother did their sister's hair, and the ingredients that they used, and oh my God, it's really, it's just surfacing all sorts of really great stuff. So I love how you can take almost any topic and students come up with really great stories and great reflections that I think are super engaging for their peers in the classroom. Also, students whose pieces are accepted get $50. So that's a nice little additional bonus. And it's hard to get accepted. I just want to say it's, we get to publish about 30 or 35 articles. And we may even be doing less than that if I try to make the magazine a little bit less dense. Right now I'm sort of squeezing in everything I can. But if I loosen it up a little bit, maybe I'll only be able to accept, 25 or something. And I get hundreds of submissions, so it's hard. And one of I'm of course thinking about the quality of the piece that I'm receiving, but I'm also thinking about a lot of other things when I accept and reject pieces, including just the diversity of the magazine. I want to make sure I have ESOL learners as well as ABE learners. I want to make sure I have some geographical diversity. I don't want all my submissions to come from New York City. I want to have age diversity. I want to have young people's voices and older people's voices and immigrant voices and native USers voices. So I'm aiming for a lot of different things when I'm accepting and rejecting pieces. So yeah. But I will say probably the most important thing about submitting to the change agent is that pieces are written from the heart, that they're powerful, that they're revealing, that they show something. Sometimes I get kind of 5-paragraph GED type essays that really are frankly pretty boring. They don't show me anything. They might recite through certain details in a certain kind of a way, but they're not going to be engaging for students. So it's okay to do a 5-paragraph essay, but it's going to need to really have something, some kind of hook or something that is going to pull the reader in. So that's a key thing that I'm going to be looking for. And often I'll get a lengthy essay and I'll see this one little bit buried in the middle of it where I feel like the student is just kind of getting to that place where they have something important to say, and I'll get back to the student and say, can you tell me more about this part? Now, this is what I want to know about, and this is what I think our readers are going to want to know about. And if, as a teacher, you can play that role, that helps a lot. So a student turns in something and you read it, they do their first draft, you read it, and you help them go after something, then you're promoting the likelihood of them getting accepted because it's going to come in stronger. So yeah, keep that in mind if you do decide to bring the call for articles into your classroom, and if you really do want to invite students to write for the magazine. Please make sure all the submissions have contact information on them. I get so many submissions, they don't have a name, they don't have a title, they don't have anything on it, and it gets really confusing when I'm dealing with hundreds of pieces of paper. So best if you can send it as an email attachment. And please do send, because honestly, we don't get too many Minnesota submissions, so I'd love to get more. All right, what are your questions about the Change Agent website? I'm going to, in a minute, we're going to break and do something a little different. I'm going to have you watch a 3-minute video about Carlos Contreras. But before we do that, I'd love to hear if you have any questions about the website or anything I've said so far. I'm looking back in the chat box, and I'm depending on my organizers to flag for me anything that I should be noticing. Can we teachers submit articles? Yeah, you can. You definitely can. I tend to be biased to students, just really trying to promote student writing, but sometimes that teacher piece comes in and it really fills a niche, and so yeah, I go with it. Or sometimes I have to recruit people to write articles on something that, you know, I really needs to be in the magazine and no student has written on it, and so I have to recruit somebody to write on it. So while we're looking at the chat box, I wonder if one of the organizers would like to throw in the URL for this video that we're going to watch. And if I get a question, I'll try to respond. And also, we're going to have a time at the very end, which is coming up soon. Our time is passing for more questions. So if you want, you can save your question for the very end. So Patsy has put in this YouTube link, and I would love it if we take a break. I see Miriam's question. Yeah, we email our call for articles out to everybody who's on our Change Agent mailing list. So if you want to be on our mailing list, just hit me up and I'll make sure you're on. You have my email address. It'll be on the last slide if you don't have it yet. So let's take a break. And actually what everybody's going to need to do now is copy that URL and put it into your, open a tab and put it into your own browser and watch this video. It's about 3 minutes. She says, here's a cleaner link. That last one was.
Yeah. And then we'll just ask people, once you've watched the video, you come back into the webinar and let us know that you're back by just chatting in the chat box that you're back, and then Cynthia will know we're ready to get our discussion started again.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the video. A lot of people are back. Let me know when you think I should pick back up.
This is Patsy. It looks like most people are either reporting back or they should be finishing up the video. I'd say maybe give it just a few more seconds and then go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I see a lot of people have come back from the video. Isn't that so? Isn't that such a great digital story? I love that. That comes out of Pima Community College in Tucson, and they do a lot of amazing digital stories. So, and we're just so lucky because Carlos is a contributor to the Career Pathways issue, and he wrote this great article called My Life in Concrete, and it kind of looks lengthy, but it's written at a fairly accessible level. It came out as level 4 using the consensus calculator, which is what I use to level the articles. And it's just a beautiful piece, and I really encourage bringing this into the classroom. The article and the video together are a great way to kind of explore what it's like, to take on a career change, to take on going to school. He's currently, you can find out from reading the article that he is studying to do social services. And I think it's so interesting that the title of the article is My Life in Concrete, which is this very fixed substance, and his life is anything but, stuck in concrete. His life is very fluid, and you can see that from all the things that he's taken on and done and accomplished. So I actually think I have that as one of the questions. Yeah, at the end of articles, sometimes I have this little after you read section where I just try to formulate questions that help students delve into the complexity of the text, or go back and use evidence from the text to form an opinion. When we're teaching to the college and career readiness standards, we have to be careful. We want to have open-ended conversations. Those are always helpful too on a lot of levels, but we also want to kind of push students to go back to the text and say, well, why do you think what you think? What is your opinion about that, and where did you get that idea from? You show me where in the text it made you think that. So, and so I try to develop questions like that. And this one, the second one here, concrete is a hard fixed substance. Is there any irony in the title, My Life in Concrete? And this getting into a fair degree of complexity. It's a level 4 article, but just even the concept of irony, of course, irony is completely understandable by any adult. Our life is so rich in irony all the time, but as an English word, it's a hard word to explain. It's a hard sort of literary word to wrap your mind around. So this is a great opportunity to think about irony and whether there is any irony in that title, My Life in Concrete, and to think about his journey and stuff. So I wish we had time to kind of get your ideas for how you might use the video and the article together, but we don't really have that much time yet left. So I want to just quickly point out to you that at the end of this article, there's this little box about careers that are hard on the body. Because one thing Carlos talks about is he worked as a concrete finisher until his knees gave out. And I love that English language learning opportunity to look at the phrasal verb give out, but what other jobs are hard on the body and why? And what would your students talk about? I think this would open up a huge amount of conversation, people discussing how their jobs put wear and tear on their body. And there's also a link here to that workplace safety lesson packet that I mentioned on the Change Agent website. So if you even started from this Carlos Contreras article, you could then dive into that workplace safety packet, and there's little bridge to kind of a lot of content. This could keep you busy for weeks. I actually did that workplace safety packet in the hotel where I work, where I teach English to housekeepers and people in the kitchen and stuff. And well, it took us months to get through that. We did so much on that packet. And I have to laugh at myself because I create these change agent activities and then I try them out in the classroom and I'm like, well, that didn't take 2 hours, that took a week, so here's just to show you in the packet itself. If you do download it, you'll see that these are the standards that are addressed in that packet. And so I try to be really specific about which standards are being addressed so that if you as a teacher, you're trying to bulk up more on certain key standards, you'll be able to do it you'll get enough hand holding here. You're getting led in the right direction. You'll be able to hitch your teaching to certain standards and feel like, yep, I can check that off. I'm really covering that. Okay, couple more little points that I want to make. One is just, I included this article in your packet. It's by Andy Nash, who many of you may know. She is a wonderful professional developer, and she works for World Education. And she wrote this article called Career Pathways Are Not Enough. And she brings up this idea that, we don't need to just provide ladders in our society, we also need to raise the floor. And what does that mean to provide more ladders and at the same time raise the floor so that the ladders, it's not such a long way up on the ladder. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I really encourage you to read it, think about bringing it into the classroom. It's written at a higher level. Andy writes way too hard, and then I try to bring it down. I think I got it maybe down to like a 8 or a 10 level. But it includes this really great chart, which is a great critical thinking opportunity. Again, it looks at the fastest growing occupations in hard numbers for 2014 to 2024. And the sad news is many of them do not require any kind of credential at all, not even a high school diploma. And they pay incredibly poorly. So as much as we emphasize career pathways, and we should continue doing that, and it's important to do that, and we also need to raise the fact that so many of the jobs that our students are going to be doing have incredibly low pay and no benefits and very little safety net. And so part of being an agent of change in this world might be, thinking about how to raise the floor. And that includes things like minimum wage, a less frayed safety net, meaning, better benefits, more health care, more accessible health care, and students can, you don't have to come in with answers because Lord knows we don't have the answers, but you can bring it in as a problem. And some people will say, well, this is too depressing. I don't want to show this to my students, but our students know this already. They're in the real world. They're working these jobs. They can survey the landscape and figure it out. So keeping it from them is not helpful, but actually showing them this, it's kind of actually an affirmation of what's happening in the real world. And then offering opportunities to think critically about it, think about how you can plug in, think about what you can do about it. Look at how US history is full of instances where people join together to make change. And indeed, as Margaret Mead said, that the only thing that ever does make change is when people get together and make it. And so to not leave you hanging there, I want to point to the change agent issue called Good Jobs, Not Just Any Jobs. And this is a magazine where we really explore in depth stories about students working to raise the floor. There's beautiful, inspiring, amazing articles by for example, car washeros, car wash workers in New York City who are experiencing wage theft and, no way to make it right, and rallied together and figured out how to, overcome that problem. And many, many stories like that, including, just somebody who figured out how to talk to her boss about something. You know, so like I always say, small ways, medium ways, big ways. So we didn't want to, the career pathways issue doesn't talk too much about raising the floor. I think there might be something in there about the minimum wage, but this issue of the change agent really does have student stories about raising the floor. So yeah, I want to just let you know that that's there. Okay, touching back again to how do you get this resource? You can buy it individually, one copy, and it only comes out twice a year, so you would just get 2 copies in a year. You can get electronic access. Like I said earlier, $20 per teacher per year. If you've got 25 teachers or more who want to get it, the cost goes down to $16. So if you have a whole program or, you know, a whole batch of teachers, you can do it that way, or you can get that bulk set, like I mentioned. Here's where we get to revisit the objectives for the webinar. So reminding you that there were 4 main objectives. One was, can you access the change agent? The other is, can you articulate benefits besides the college and career readiness standards that you get from the change agent? Can you identify how the change agent resources can help you support CCRS implementation? And then can you apply some really specific strategies? So this is one of those cheating objectives where we embed 4 things into one objective, but basically it's just, you know, do you feel like you have access to those specific resources like the grid, like the activities in the magazine, you know, the little boxes and discussion questions and things like that, the audio, the call for articles, those sort of specific pieces. So Patsy, do you have a poll for us?
I do. Give me just a moment to, your screen's gonna disappear for a second. No one be alarmed, and then I'm gonna launch a test here. And instead of looking at my calendar in a moment, we should be able to look at a test. Do you see a test in progress? Can someone let me know?
I see test in progress.
Okay, good. And as an organizer, we'll see something different than the participants see. So we'll just give people a couple minutes here. Looks like 30% have submitted, so we'll just give people a few more seconds to turn that in, and then hopefully I'll be able to share those results as well.
Yeah, and if you finished the poll and you have a question, please feel free to write it into the chat box, and I can be, uh-oh, somebody got a 0% score.
Oh dear. That shouldn't be how it works, so
That's nothing personal, Miriam, I'm sure.
No, I think it has to do with how the test was set up. Okay, looks like we've got 53% submitted. Go ahead and take a minute to finish that up.
The worst grade, yeah, 0. Yeah, you can only improve from there, Miriam. You can only go up.
Just a few more seconds, folks, and then we'll close that up. All right, I think I'm going to go ahead and close, and hopefully I'll be able to share those results. Let's see.
There we go, Patsy.
Can you see it? All right.
Yes. 12 tests were submitted.
So that did not work the way I thought it would. It looks like it just shows all the things people answered.
Okay. Okay.
So I apologize for that. It has to do with how I set it up, so that's my bad.
That's okay.
I set it up so that there was no correct answer, of course, but I thought it would show how many people gave us each one. Right. So I apologize for that. I'm going to hand it back to you so that you can show the objectives again.
Yeah.
Presenter again, and then hopefully we'll get more input from people on the evaluation that'll come their way to your inbox a little bit later.
That would be great, and I would love, let me go to the next screen. I think it's got my email address and Patsy's, and also a recording of this webinar will be available on the YouTube channel, so you can check it out there, share it with friends.
Cindy, you'll need to share your screen again.
Oh. Did
There
I?
you go. There we
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
showing now.
So there's our email addresses and some more information for you. Christine, who is on the webinar, I forgot to turn the mic over to you at a certain point when we were going to, we were talking about levels and the use of levels in the CCR standards. Do you want to take the last minute here to just get us up to speed on that? If you're in the room still, and if your mic is
I am in the
unmuted.
room still. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't know. Just the one thing that we wanted to address is just the readability, or how you're finding the different levels. That that if teachers want to use, if they want to address Anchor 10, reading Anchor 10 for text complexity, they need to keep. They are going to need to measure with a Lexile or an ATOS score, in addition to what is there. That's only one purpose for using the text. The levels that you've deemed are fine, are great. The material can be used in so many different ways. That is just one little text complexity tweak. And if anyone has any questions about that, they can call me. But yeah, there's so many different, I myself have used the change agent in so many different ways. For speaking and listening, for writing, for reading, students love it.
Great. That's so good to hear. Thank you. Well, we have about 2 minutes left, so if there are any more questions, I would love to field them, or if anybody has any questions for anybody else on any of the organizers or anything else, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, or your feedback, or any questions at all. And if you can't think of them now, please just do send me an email, or if you had a question that I didn't quite answer for you in the context of the webinar, I'd love to hear from you.
If you'll just click back on your PowerPoint, you should be able to see your final slide. There it is. Great, thank you.
Somebody's asking, it seems like it's better for higher level learners. It is, each magazine looks that way unto itself. And when you flip through it, it's like, oh, this is for higher level. But if you go to the website and you click on that global table of contents, and then click on level, you'll see there's tons of pieces at lower levels. So if you teach only lower levels, I would recommend getting an online subscription and using pages from various issues that are low level. Because there are a lot if you go at it that way. If you go at it magazine by magazine, it's going to maybe seem a little overwhelming. So I hope that answers your question. Well, it's 4:30. I don't want to keep people longer than they signed up for. Thank you all so much for being on this webinar. I just got so much out of it. I loved hearing your comments, and I love being able to share the change agent with you. So I'd love to hear back from you if you have any feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia, so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's so nice to hear from the editor, someone who works with us so closely and can give us the, really the detail around how it's organized and what's available. That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thanks everyone for joining us today.